everyone, this is Dr. Stringer. We are talking today about evidence-based and intelligence-led policing. I think I said before that this is like the wave of the future, and so it's pretty cool to talk about and learn about. It's a good thing to have some knowledge of going into criminal justice because this is going to be a lot more prolific as the years go by. So, with that, I'll go ahead and add a little bit here. One thing I want to impress upon you all, and I think I've said this at the beginning, but I'm not going through every little thing that's in the textbook, so I want to make sure that you're still reading along in your textbooks. These lectures are often, very similar to the textbook, and I'll hit a lot of the high points, and then, as you probably figured out, I add, other supplemental information that's not in the book, which I think, is interesting, and, my stories, which most students appreciate, but some don't. But I feel like these examples help you all to kind of, drive the point home, I guess. Anyway, so smart policing. Smart policing is generally when police and criminal justice researchers like myself form partnerships or relationships, work together to identify solutions to solve crime problems. Um, this is really important and it can be very helpful for police officers because they're not criminologists. One of the things that is really important when figuring out how to solve pretty much any problem, even if it's not a crime problem, is to know what's causing that problem. And so oftentimes police officers might not know what's causing that problem. However, criminologists, that's our job, is to kind of figure out why people are committing crime. So that's a very helpful endeavor. And it's kind of fun when I do it, get to work with the cops and see their impressions on things. Some are a little bit more enthusiastic to work with academics than others are, and that's fine too. So one of the things that kind of has ramped this up, it started about almost 15 years ago now, with the Smart Policing Initiative. And this was led by the Department of Justice at the federal level, and of course there's a lot of money involved in it, which when there's money behind things, it is amazing how easy it is to get police chiefs to buy into it. Oh, you want me to do this? Oh, you're going to give me money for it? Sounds great. You know, some projects that we've worked on has been prescription drug abuse, homicide, domestic violence, gangs, gun violence, and so on. Um, Here locally, I've worked with the Marietta PD and their ASSIST program, which is a program designed at getting people that are addicted to opioids off the street and into rehab. And essentially, what that is that when someone is revived by Narcan, because they've overdosed on an opiate, the ASSIST program officers will go in often plain clothes or training clothes, not full uniforms, because that's a bit more, aggressive. You want to be more laid back with it and try to convince them to go into treatment and get help. We're working, because I'm on the board over at the extension, to try to get free places for them to get treatment, because one of the hardest things getting drug treatment is not having insurance or the cash to pay for it, as you can imagine. So that's a big problem. But there are other things with this as well. And so data-driven and evidence-based policing is very important. And we've touched on some of these things throughout class, as you'll see if you look down this list. And this really helps police leaders to use data to make better informed decisions. Some early examples were, the random patrol experiments when we talked about the Kansas City patrol experiment and how they found out, well, increase in patrols didn't really matter. We found out that rapid response didn't really help to solve crimes either. So knowing all of this stuff helps administrators and police officers to figure out where they want to use their resources best to actually combat the crime problem. It's imperative information to have in order to be getting the best bang for your buck, so to speak. And then there's been thousands of others since then. We've done crime hotspots, crackdowns, DNA, COP, as I said, COP and POP last lecture. There's been research on body cameras. Well, are body cameras effective at reducing police complaints and things like that? Training, use of force is another big one. So all of this research out there is really helpful if police officers can digest it and administrators can, and then use it to make better decisions. So keep that in mind for those of you that go into the field. A lot of people don't read our research once we get it out there. Besides data, what could policy decisions be made? Well, one is assumptions. For years it was assumed that preventative patrol would reduce crime. Now we know that's not really necessarily the case. Tradition. People tend to just do things the way they've always been done because that's how it's always been done, even though that's not really effective, right? A funny story comes to mind about there was this woman who always, when she baked a bread, she would cut it in half before she put it in the oven, and her daughter asked her, well, why do you do that? And it's like, well, that's the way my mother did it. And so then the granddaughter went and asked the grandmother, well, why do you do that? And she says, well, because when I started doing it, the oven was too small for it to fit in there whole, and I had to cut it in half to fit it in the oven, And so then the mother kept that same tradition of doing that, even though she didn't have to anymore. And so, it's asking questions like that about why would he do this, when there's a more effective way to do it, that gets people out of that tradition and can really help. Authority is another one. Decisions are based on the will of the management. So, if the upper people in administration don't want to do something, they have the authority not to do it. And if they want to do something, then they have the authority to do that too, as long as it's not illegal. And sometimes they do it even if it is illegal. So that's another side story. But anyway, so should policy decisions be based on research findings? Well, this is really going to be more relevant for leadership, for upper administration who are making these decisions, than it will be for your average patrol officer. But if you're looking to get promoted, it could be helpful to say, well, look, Sarge, thinking about what we're doing here, and research shows that if we did it this way, then that would be more effective. Not only cost-wise, it would save us, money and manpower, but it'd also be more effective in achieving our goal of, reducing speeding or reducing crime, cutting back on murders, drunk driving, whatever it is, one of the things that I think that is important to keep in mind, too, is that research may not always translate into other jurisdictions. And I think I hinted at that earlier, that it can give you, looking at the prior research can give you ideas, but what works in Marietta might not work as well, even in, Cobb County, which is right next door. If you want a more extreme example, I guess you could look at, maybe Florida or maybe New York City versus, I'm trying to think of a really rural area. I don't know, Montana or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. So things may or may not translate across different jurisdictions. That's something to keep in mind. The number of studies is critical. If you've only got one study that says that something's, effective, then that's not the same as having a pile of research that says that this is the way to go, right? Then again, you also have to think about, political considerations, resources, and liability. These are some other big ones that aren't really related to research, but political, is important because, the chief isn't usually elected, but the mayor is, and the mayor's going to want, things done that are going to get him reelected. Resources are a constant consideration because police have limited resources. You only got so much money in your budget, so you got to figure out how to use that wisely. And this is something that can help with that, I think. To say, well, we don't want to put our resources here, we want to put them there, things like that. And then, of course, liability. You don't want to don't want to do anything to get sued. That drains your resources because then you've got to pay attorneys. CompStat, this is not really as prolific as it once was. Just so you know, CompStat stands for computer statistics. That's just what they kind of came up with. So keep that in mind. But it's a data-driven approach to policing where they kind of review the stats every quarter, every month, and it relies on the management model. They usually have whoever's the precinct captain or in charge of whatever geographic unit will be responsible for increasing or decreasing crime or increasing citizen satisfaction, whatever it is that their goal is. They use data to identify serious crime problems, and then there's accountability of that captain or whoever that is supposed to resolve this problem. Um, there's some limitations to it as well. It got really big in New York City back in the 90s, but it's kind of waned ever since then. Um, some limitations on data manipulations. Effective tactics are not really well defined, and when you do stuff like this, it puts added strain on these precinct captains and these officers to reduce crime and by kind of any means necessary. I think it could kind of be a way that the structure of the department might be pushing officers to do things that may or may not be legal or ethical that they wouldn't ordinarily do in order to make the upper administration happy. You want to be mindful of stuff like that and keep an eye out for it because that can get a lot of people in a lot of trouble. Looking back at the New York City stop and frisk policy, they probably, I don't know this, but they probably had some sort of directive from above to crack down on gun crime in the city, and so they said, well, we're just going to frisk everybody that we see and see if they have a gun on them, which you can't do. So one of the newer things, which is like one of my favorite, types of policing, types of intelligence-led policing, is what's called predictive policing. And if you've seen this movie with Tom Cruise called Minority Report, that's obviously not the way it's done in real life, but it gets at the same idea that they're trying to predict crime before it occurs. And so the ways that we do this is, well, we can predict where crimes are going to occur, when they will occur, against whom they will occur, and who will commit them. Um, I don't know if I've told you all about the 80-20 rule, but 80% of crimes are committed by about 20% of the population. Consequently, 80% of the crimes also only occur in 20% of places. That's what's known as a crime hotspot, right? And so by identifying these crime hotspots, these people that, commit, crimes habitually, that can help you to identify who and where the crime's going to occur, when. Let's think about it. At 10 o'clock in the morning, you're much less likely to be mugged than you are at 10 o'clock at night. So those are things that can go into these models too. They're all predictive statistical models, and they're very effective. I'm going to show you all an example of what's called PredPol, which I wish I would have come up with the idea because I'd be rich, and it's not really that complicated. But anyway, so if we move on with that, looking into crime analysis. Pretty much every department that's not a really small department has a crime analyst nowadays. This is somebody that analyzes crime data on a regular basis and presents these findings and these data to the upper echelons of the police department so they can see not only where crime's happening but changes in where crime's happening. And they really want to see, like, well, we sent a bunch of officers to this area to do this last week. Did crime go down any this week or stuff like that? And see these things. Geospatial analysis is kind of one of the ways that they do it. There's a program called ArcGIS, which I've actually used. I think I've got some examples later on from my own geospatial crime intel analysis, which I'll show you all. So Geospatial crime analytics is really geographic. It's based on where crime is going to occur. Um, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So if there's been a lot of crimes in one area, chances are, unless you change something, that there's going to be a lot of future crimes in that area. So these are things to know about. You don't want to have everybody in the Cobb County Police Department hanging out in West Cobb when most of the crime's over in East Cobb, right? So to know where all the crime is and know where to allocate your resources is an important thing to do. Another example that we came up with some years ago is what's known as the Koper curve. Um, and so you can read the article if you want, if you're interested in this sort of thing. The Koper curve essentially looks at how many minutes a police officer needs to spend in an area in order to create some sort of deterrent effect. And this is really useful with state police in rural areas, and I think that's where it started at. And I've seen some other research where they did this too, where you could have one state trooper for like 3 or 4 counties, and this one state trooper can go and sit in like the downtown area or pick a spot where maybe things are going on, and go sit there for 20 minutes, and that kind of creates this deterrent effect. Now, they found that after 20 minutes, it doesn't really create any more deterrent effect than that initial 20 minutes. So there's really no benefit for the officer to sit there for more than 20 minutes. So you can go to here for 20 minutes, you go to there for 20 minutes, like you can get several different spots for 20 minutes, and that's a good way of spending your patrol time so that you're getting deterrence throughout as many places as possible versus thinking that, oh, well, we've got to spend several hours here in order to deter people, because the thinking and the logic and theory is that, well, people might know that you're not sitting in that same spot anymore after 20 minutes, and this gets into something called residual deterrent or residual crime deterrent effect. Because, well, they know that you're not there anymore in that specific spot, but most criminals are going to think, well, this state trooper or this officer was just here, so he's probably not too far away. And that's going to kind of deter them from crime for some time. And this is a good way, if you only have limited resources, to be able to achieve the maximum amount of deterrence from just one or maybe even two officers going around and sitting in different places. One other method has been to go and just spend a few minutes at the local bar or something like that and talk to people. I know there's one story where the state trooper was implementing this, and he was talking about how people came up to him and they were like, "Oh, are you the new state trooper in town?" and stuff, because he wasn't just sitting in his car. He would spend his 20 minutes engaging in more community activities and talking with people during his 20 minutes there, which is an even better use of your time. And he would go into the local bars and talk to them and, be like, "You guys haven't had too much to drink? If you have, I hope you're not going to be driving," and stuff like that. People thought that he was the new state trooper in town. And real facts was he wasn't the new state trooper in town. He just was going to that town for 20 minutes, maybe once or twice a week, and that was enough for them to think that he was patrolling in that town all the time. And so that study helped to illustrate that, and has created that. It's now kind of famous and called the Koper curve. That after 20 minutes you get no residual effects. Anyway, or no effects on deterrence. So this is. Did I get into crime maps, representation where crimes have occurred? GIS, geospatial crime analysts, able to predict about where and when crime will occur to inform patrol allocations. Yeah. Okay. So here's just an example that I did some years ago, and this is all the DUI arrests in the state, or I'm sorry, in the city of Virginia Beach. If you look over here, there's a couple of outliers. These people were actually into the city of Norfolk when they got arrested, but it was a Virginia Beach arrest. Probably they followed them across the border or something like that. This guy might have been like a pursuit because he got a little bit further into the city than this other guy did. But anyway, if you look at this, one of the few things that you can notice is where are these arrests taking place? You know, one of the big things you'll probably notice right off is there's a whole lot of them along this area here. Um, Now this is known as the Virginia Beach oceanfront. This is where all the hotels and the bars and the resorts and things like that are. And so that's, you know, an important thing to know that, hey, this is where most of the drunk driving arrests are occurring because there's a lot of drunk driving there. This is where all the tourists are. Consequently, you have an interstate that goes down here, and then I think it goes up this way too. So all along this interstate, this is Interstate 264, you're getting a lot of arrests here. And then throughout the rest of the city, you have some here and there. Down in this end of the city is more rural area. This part is all beachfront, but this is this is where the locals go to the beach. To be honest, and this is called Sandbridge Beach, and so the locals tend to go to Sandbridge, and I'm sure the locals aren't drinking much less than the tourists are, but they know where to go to kind of avoid being captured, so to speak. So if you were focusing your patrol efforts or trying to figure out, you know, where to go. Also up here, this is kind of Chicks Beach, is what it's called in Virginia Beach. This is another local hangout area too, but there have been a lot of drunk driving crashes up there, mainly related to pedestrians leaving the bars and then getting hit by cars as they cross the street. So they've increased the drunk driving enforcement a little bit up that way. So this is just kind of a spot, and each one of these black spots kind of illustrates a DUI arrest. So you can see how they're clustered in different places. This is what is known, this is Norfolk and Virginia Beach. This is what is known as a hotspots analysis. And so you actually have some of these, which are like a blue, that would actually be called a cold spot. That means that you're having less than the average amount of DUI arrest. And as you see, you have the same hotspots similarly distributed as we saw along the interstate and along this this area with the Virginia Beach oceanfront. The other areas of the city are just kind of average, right? So yeah, that's just an example of a hotspots analysis. Now you see when you look down this way and over here, the previous map, I don't think it really showed us, but this area here is also considered to be a hotspot according to this analysis. So officers may or may not know about that, but that might be something that new to information to be gleaned from this, right? One thing you can do too, instead of using DUI arrests, because DUI arrests kind of depend on where the police are, and the police have to be there already in order to make arrests. But another thing that we did with this was, and I don't, this map might actually be crashes and not arrest. But one of the things you can do is if you're trying to actually reduce DUI crashes, is map the crashes and where the crashes are occurring, and see where the hotspots for crashes are. Because obviously if you're having hotspots for crashes, you know, that's your big problem, and then you can send the police in to help to mediate those effects, right? To try to crack down on it. Anyway, so some geospatial crime analysis tools include data on demographics, locations of businesses, alcohol outlets. I did a whole paper on that once, mapping those and drunk driving as well as police enforcement, parolee residences, gang territories, drug houses, traffic stops, calls for service. LexisNexis has a crime mapping tool. In many areas you can actually pull a crime map. I don't think Cobb County does it. So I pulled it up one time. Another thing you can do is you can pull up the sex offender registry, and it'll be mapped out to see if you have any sex offenders living nearby. Apparently we have a couple that live in this nice neighborhood right behind campus, just in case you didn't know. Anyway, and so this is just kind of another example of how you might map crimes, and this is from Philly, and they actually are mapping different types of crimes. And this is important too because you want to know what different types of crimes are happening in different areas because you're going to address them differently, right? Aggravated assaults, homicides, rapes, robberies. I mean, these are all, much more severe crimes, right? And I would be more concerned with these than, minor offenses like drug offenses or prostitution or, something like that because those are kind of victimless crimes. So anyway, um, Predpol is this new technology that has been implemented, and the LAPD has done it. And I usually show this video in class, and if you're interested, let me know. If I don't have it in D2L, I can send you the link. But essentially, it predicts much better than, here's the crime analyst line, and then here is the Predpol line of accuracy. And essentially, this software can predict not only where, but within a certain time frame where a crime is going to occur. See, so you got like a box here and a box there, and it's able to predict that there will be an armed robbery on in this block, between the hours of, I don't know, 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. or something like that. And so then, okay, well, we're going to have an officer go and stand there for this point in time. Now, obviously, this is not deterministic. It's a prediction. So, it's got some margin of error, and it might not happen, but it's probably going to happen. Thus, it's a good idea to allocate some resources to this, right? And this has been really big in the LAPD. I don't know if any other departments have used it, but they've actually found some success with it there too. So that's something that I think is going to get really popular too. Intelligence-led policing is already using what's called a crime analyst, which is someone like this person sitting here. Where this person sits here and analyzes all these crime maps, all these things. They do the hotspots analysis and look at various different things that similar to what I've been showing you, and try to figure out where the crime is going to occur and how we could best address it. And these are things that the average police officer is just not trained to do. So you see that this is providing a lot of new intel, which is really great. Another thing that I'll mention that's not in your textbook with regard to intel is also cameras. Cameras, especially in Atlanta, are all over the place. Baltimore's got them. A lot of the big cities are getting cameras where these analysts can actually look at the cameras and see what's going on. Atlanta just installed a gunshot detection system which detects gunshots, and then what it does too is it also turns the cameras on to wherever it detected those gunshots, so that way it can figure out what's happening before the officers are dispatched there. Okay, there's a guy with an AK-47, we need to send SWAT and several people, or it was a car backfire, we don't need to worry about it too much, or some kid with fireworks, stuff like that. And so that can be very important. In the UK, they're using facial recognition technology with these cameras, and I don't think that they have gotten quite into that just yet in the U.S., but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens sooner rather than later. They're already doing it with TSA, and when you get on planes and things like that, they're doing the facial recognition, and a lot of that too is looking at differences in your face and signs of stress and things like that, and that's just another piece of intel that's a predictor that maybe you're up to something you shouldn't be. So some limitations of this. It's a relatively new concept. Best practices don't really exist just yet. You can't just collect data. It has to be analyzed. If you collect it and it sits, in a computer somewhere, no one does anything with it, it's not going to help. It requires significant resources. And how does this all affect individual privacy is another question that people have been asking. So as far as data, the NCIC is a source of data. It's maintained by the FBI, and it has all your information from articles, guns, boats, securities, license plates, missing offenders, missing persons, fugitives, gangs, sex offender registry, and so on, your criminal record. Here in Georgia, we have the GCIC, the Georgia Criminal Information System. And then the last thing that I will talk about, as far as intel, is, well, it will be social media, but I'm going to get to some other stuff first. Uh, so some other sources of intelligence is going to be GRIP, which is your gang narcotics system. Interpol has their own case tracking system. And then INS has got something. El Paso Intelligence Center is called EPIC. That's where they were going to ship me off to when I was working for the Justice Department. They were going to promote me, but I was going to be moved to El Paso, Texas, and I didn't want to go to El Paso, Texas. I've been there, but I wasn't a big fan. So then you all got me. So that's where most of the federal intelligence comes out of nowadays. The Federal Bureau of Prisons has their own Sentry system. Equifax and TransUnion, your credit reports, your credit card statements, your bank records, all these things, all sources of intelligence. And lastly, your social media, your Facebook and your Twitter. I can't tell you how many cases have been solved uh, by Facebook and Twitter. That's one of the first things detectives do when they get a suspect is they go check them out online. And I've seen a lot of people get locked up over stupid things that they posted online. I've seen a lot of people not get jobs when their background check pulled up something that they did. So be very mindful of that. One case that comes to mind is a guy that we had on probation. He was a gang member, he's on probation, and one of the conditions was he wasn't allowed to get any new gang tattoos. And then he went and did it, and he got, a gang tattoo. He posted the picture on Facebook for everybody to see, and, lo and behold, his PO saw it, and he was violated and shipped up, to prison for the remainder of his sentence, which was quite some time, all over a tattoo. Um, and please do not think that a lot of people are lulled into the sense of security that, oh, Facebook and Twitter, I have my friend settings set and stuff like that. Zuckerberg will give out your information if the police ask. The banks, they don't need a subpoena to get your bank information, your credit card information. They get that. They can see where you've gone, what you've bought, when you were there, when you came back. As long as your banks will give it to them willingly, they don't need a warrant to get that. Now, if your bank says no, then then they would need to get a warrant. But they could just give them access, and that happens all the time. Other thing I didn't mention was the CODIS database. CODIS is where all the DNA evidence is stored, and that's a huge national database where if there's a crime that occurs and there's DNA evidence collected, it will be put in that database and stored until, and if there's a match, then it will obviously give you your suspect, but oftentimes it's stored in there even if there isn't a match, and then someone will get arrested and sentenced for something else, and then they'll have to submit their DNA. So in case you don't know, if you're ever convicted of a felony, you're required to submit your DNA to this DNA database. There's also the AFIS system, which is the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, which is national as well and keeps everybody's fingerprints housed in there. The other more recent type of data that has become useful has been Ancestry.com. That has DNA evidence in there, and they're more than happy to cooperate with law enforcement. I think that was the Golden Gate Killer was recently arrested 30 years after he had killed anybody. He was a serial killer from like the 70s. And one of his relatives had submitted stuff to Ancestry.com, and they found that it was a match to a relative of that person's was the Golden Gate Killer. And I could be wrong with the Golden Gate Killer. They might have been a different name. It's Golden Gate something. And so they used that to link him to the crimes. Now, obviously, that's not enough for a conviction. They had to get more evidence, but then once they knew who the guy was, it wasn't that difficult. So keep those things in mind, too. There's all sorts of data going around out there, and we're all in in the visual world, the digital world these days. But anyway, um, so all this stuff is being used for law enforcement, homeland security. One of the things when I left DOJ that they were trying to do was to create an entirety database where if they typed in Richard Stringer, it would come up with my Facebook, my Equifax, my TransUnion, my NCIC information, my pretty much everything about me that could be even scraped off of anywhere online through any database would all just be right there. And I don't know if they've managed to put that together yet. All your Google and other things would all be right there. And I think that's a good thing for them to have. Because it's going to speed up and help with a lot of criminal investigations. I don't really care if they can see what I'm doing. As a criminologist, they'll probably think I Google some weird stuff. Well, I research these things. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I won't ramble anymore, and I hope to see you all next time. Please don't forget to finish your discussion boards and quizzes and tests, and remember that the worst grade you can possibly get is a 0. So don't not do any of your assignments, because I have no choice to give you a 0 if you do that. Anyway, on a brighter note, everybody have a good day, and I'll see you next time.